Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV WORLD. We have two very important stories in our show to discuss today. The first of which is with reference to the political scenario within Pakistan. We've discussed this at length in our previous shows as well as to what is going on in the country, what sort of speculations are being discussed in the media, how much truth there is to that, and what is really going on in terms of the opposition parties and the current government. We know that the PMLN has also met with the PPP. And there has been talks about having a joint stance against the current government, bringing in all options on the table, including a no confidence motion. Things like this have been discussed in the past as well. There has been talk of a long march as well. There has been talk about joining hands with the PDM. We'll see how much of that is true and explore this in further detail. What sort of options actually does the opposition have with reference to the current government, what it is that their plans are, and why now the PMLN has moved forward with a green signal on an in-house change and what that means for them and for the opposition stance in general. We also know that co-chairperson of the PPP, Asif Ali Zardari, has spoken about the chances of PPP joining hands with PDM being slim and whether or not this is actually going to happen and what sort of impact it will have on the 23rd March long march that the opposition actually plans on having. We'll also be looking at the situation across the border. We know that the standoff that has existed at the line of actual control between India and China has been going on for about 20 months now. This standoff started on May 5th, 2020 and has been going on for a while now. There have been so many rounds of talks and all of them have resulted in a stalemate. The last round of talks, which was the 13th, was held in October, and now we know that another is planned on the 12th of January. That will be the 14th level talk, and we'll see whether or not this round is going to result in something forward for India and China and what sort of issues are going to come into play and whether or not we're going to see any sort of progress in the relations between the two countries. As usual, we've been joined in the studio by Mr. Farrukh Pitafi and Mr. Raja Faisal to discuss all of these issues in further detail. We have also been joined by our guests online, and I'll introduce them as they've joined us for our first segment with regards to the current situation in Pakistan with the political scenario. We have been joined by Barrister Abdullah Mumtaz. Thank you very much for joining us. Mr. Abdullah is a leader from the PTI. With reference to what is going on at the moment when we see the opposition stances coming forward. This is something that has been in the talks for a couple of months now. We see that the stances of the opposition parties come together and then they fizzle out, and then again we see the alliances reforming. Do you think that this time around, is there any some sort of substantial or fundamental change in their stance, or do they have any weightage in the kind of talks they're talking about, especially with regards to the kind of movement we see coming in from the PMLN side and their support for an in-house change?
That's an excellent question. And I would like to say that the Pakistan Democratic Movement, PDM, is still as clueless as ever. These are parties which are ideological. Are you able to hear me? Hello? Hello?
Carlos Saab, carry on. We can hear you.
Oh, that's great. So, like I'm saying, these parties are ideologically apart and are one of the sole reasons Pakistan finds itself where it does today. They have failed in their governance in the past. They have ruled Pakistan for many decades. And in my eyes and the eyes of the Pakistani public, they've lost their moral right to even criticize the current government. They've had many a term to deliver their promises, and they've failed on a wholesale basis. Today, they've clambered together this loose fabric of a coalition, which I would not even call it that, and they want to march to Islamabad in a long march. And I have to say, the long march analogy that they like to draw upon continuously is one that they refer to as Chairman Mao. And that long march of Chairman Mao was completely different to the long march that these people are referring to. Mao's long march consisted of peasants walking thousands of miles barefoot to the countryside of China. These long marches that these people are talking about will be in their air-conditioned V8 Land Cruisers racing up the M2 to Islamabad. That's not a long march in the eyes of the people. These people have absolutely no idea, no policies whatsoever, and I think they will fail once again.
To the kind of support that is being spoken about with the masses, especially talking in terms of the kind of price hikes that exist, the kind of economic situation there is, how the common people are suffering, the kind of stances that are put forward by the opposition parties, do they actually have the support of the masses in terms of voters, in terms of political support, in terms of the support they require for people to come out in the long march? Does that even exist, or is this just something that they're cashing on or trying to work towards with reference to their support when, of course, such a situation exists in the country?
That's again an excellent question. Basically, these people, these loose coalition of parties, they're trying to be extremely opportunistic here in an aggressive manner to try and capitalize on what they perceive to be the government's challenges at present. And you mentioned inflation. Yes, inflation is a challenge that our government is facing. We will concede on that. But it's a challenge that is worldwide. We are still an import-based economy. And the challenge that we're facing is as a result of an international price hike. And it has affected Pakistanis up and down the country. But Prime Minister Imran Khan's focus, inshallah, this year is to try and drive down the prices of basic commodities so the people of Pakistan can afford them. But as far as these parties are concerned, they themselves have done the exact same in the past, and they've done nothing different. So if they seem to think that if they were to be brought back to power, they will do something absolutely different, I don't think that's the case. They too will go to the IMF. They too will get the same solutions. And like I said, the people of Pakistan are extremely fed up. They don't want this baggage from the past. Maulana Fazlur Rahman and Mian Nawaz Sharif Sahib, who refuses to come back even as of today. I mean, he went to the United Kingdom on the pretext of medical treatment, but he's still not back. It's been over 2 years now. So the people want leaders that they can believe in, leaders that follow by example. And as far as we have seen, there is a bankruptcy of leadership in this coalition. And that is why I personally think that this coalition will fail in their endeavors. They've failed in the past and they will continue to fail.
All right, Farrukh, let's look at the options that the opposition parties actually have right now, and the options there for the current government as well. What sort of steps and measures do you see that the opposition parties taking in the near future? And then what is at stake for the current government?
Right. First of all, I think the opposition wants to try to fail the mini budget, so to speak. I think because it is a money bill, and if it doesn't pass, the government automatically fails, right? This is thought to be how the parliamentary democracy works. Okay. My understanding is that it is not going to happen that way because A, it is bigger than any political party or agenda. It is a concern regarding righting Pakistan's economy, and we are, since we are in talks with the IMF and other institutions, this is going to be a big issue. And that's why I think that magically, in the past also, we have seen that the opposition, suddenly some switch flips and opposition loses all volition. And then they end up actually passing many laws, or then they are actually, seen walking out or holding placards in one corner. So something of that sort might happen. And I believe that they are going to, the government is going to manage to pass this bill. Otherwise, it will be very easy for the opposition to actually remove the government, because if money bill fails, the government actually loses. But regarding what other options do they have, they could have actually united and brought in some in-house change. But they haven't actually been able to do it. It doesn't start from center, it starts from the province of Punjab. Because in Punjab, the margin of victory for the current government is even thinner. It is literally a hung house. So a few members from there to here, and the entire apple cart topples. And there too, opposition has refused to actually bring about any change, because what happens then? If you bring about the change, if you bring down the government in Punjab, then who's going to be the chief minister? Usually it is the opposition leader. Who is opposition leader? It is Hamza Shahbaz. Hamza Shahbaz might be a cousin of Maryam Nawaz, but he is also a competitor. So you don't want to empower him, and that's why you don't want to bring about that kind of change. Since day before yesterday, since Murray situation actually emerged, you will notice every spokesman or every supporter of PMLN in the media, we have do have embeds from them as well, right? So they all of a sudden have started rooting for Osman Buzdar, and that actually tells you why, because that calls out PMLN's game and their internal divides. That is not happening. So I don't see how that is going to happen at the center at this moment.
Yeah, if you can allow me, I
Sure.
just wanted to ask a question from Barrister Abdullah. Abdullah, don't you think that suddenly these kind of green signals coming after a very important a press conference that took place last week, in which obviously there was a propaganda going on very recently about that institutions are a certain party is involved in talks with institutions and trying to get their ways in, but now when they fully failed because the institutions do not want to be part of any sort of politics or anything, and they have categorically refused of any such of the meetups or anything. Don't you think that this time the green signals coming just because of one reason, that they had failures from all of the sides, and now they want to go back to their basics, which were obviously PDM. They want to rejoin them and they want to hype up their activities in there so that they can grab on their own politics, the previous politics. But looking at the facts, looking at the propaganda they were promoting, don't you think that the other parties would be aware of these facts, that now after being failed from every side, they are coming back to us, and they would not be in a position to carry on with them like they used to do before?
Thank you for your question. You're always very incisive when you give information such as this, but my response is as follows. As far as the Pakistan that establishment have continuously been neutral. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, go on.
Yes. So the establishment of Pakistan have always been neutral. They are not wading into these political waters. And the PTM has, in their desperation, if you would like to call it that, have tried to pull the establishment into the political fold. And I call this a cry of desperation. And you've seen in the past how they've tried to, some of the leaders like Rana Fazlur Rahman even called out the names of certain generals. And I would say that it was completely despicable. And those parts of the establishment have not sent out any green signals to anyone. They've continued to remain neutral. They're working for the betterment of Pakistan. My plea to the politicians in Pakistan is, let's stay within the field of politics and ignore the wider aspects of this, work towards the betterment of Pakistani people, and
there seems to be some technical problem. The connection seems to be failing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdullah. Barrister Abdullah Mumtaz was with us in the first segment, talking to us about the political scenario in the country, whatever the situation may be. Of course, what we hope is from the opposition parties not to do actions just for the sake of toppling the government or fulfilling their own agendas, but actually doing something for the people of Pakistan, actually moving forward as a responsible opposition. We will now move on to our second segment, which is with regards to the situation at the line of actual control between India and China. We are seeing a confirmation of the 14th round of talks that are going to be held on the 12th of January. And we'll see whether or not this is actually going to result in progress towards peace and disengagement. Before we continue our discussion on this and introduce our guest, let's look at a short report prepared by our team, and then we'll continue the discussion.
hold constructive dialogue on 12th of January through diplomatic and military channels in order to resolve remaining issues in eastern Ladakh. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin stated that the current situation on the border areas with India was stable and confirmed that the 14th round of Corps Commander level meeting on the Chinese side of the Chushul Maldo meeting point to discuss disengagement process including resolution of issues in the hot springs area. Last year on October 10th, the 13th round of military talks took place. However, it ended in a deadlock and both parties have failed to make any headway. Previously, on May 5, 2020, the eastern Ladakh border standoff between the Indian and Chinese militaries erupted, and now each side currently has around 50,000 to 60,000 troops along the line of actual control. It remains to be seen whether the 14th round of talks will yield a positive result or this 20-month-long confrontation will continue.
Well, you heard the report, and we know the situation that is going on the line of action control for a while now, and we've seen that many rounds of talks have taken place. What is the next step forward in terms of actual outcomes from the 14th level talks, and what needs to be done to disengage the troops at the border, and then, of course, move forward with positive relations between India and China? All of this is going to be discussed in our segment, the second segment of the show today. For this, we've been joined by two experts online, and I'll introduce them as they join us. We are going to be joined by Shalinder Singh, who's a veteran Indian Army. He's also an international and defense strategic analyst. And we'll also be joined by Brigadier Retired Mr. Haris Nawaz, who's a senior analyst. We'll welcome them in the show as soon as they become part of it. Before we go on to them, Faisal, let's take a look at the kind of progress or the kind of actions that have taken place prior to the 14th level talks that we'll see on the 12th. The previous talks seem to bring about no real change, no real development, and so one would assume that the 14th round of talks is going to result in the same. Do you think that this round of talk could actually bring something new to the table?
Sana, one thing is for sure, of course, the way India wants it to happen, it doesn't take place, but still India hasn't got any other option to staying and remaining quiet on that. India doesn't have the capacity to counter China, and China, for India, they have been claiming that the biggest success is that we have agreed to sit on the table and talk about it rather than getting into another conflict or another armed conflict like they had in Galwan in 2020. So they have successfully avoided that. But at the same time, if we look at the ground realities, the constructions of the roads, the infrastructure, the bridges, everything is being built by the Chinese on their side, and it is being said that the time they used to take to come to eastern Ladakh from Tibet in 12 hours, now they have reduced it to 4 hours. So the movements of the armed forces, the equipment and everything, it would be very rapid for the Chinese whenever they want to have a go on the Indian army.
Right.
They can easily do it and they can easily maneuver, and I think this is a huge achievement from the Chinese side. At the same time, they have fully completed 4 of the airstrips for them, air bases which are fully equipped to count or to attack India at any time. And I think it's a huge achievement for the Chinese. They have checkmated India.
Are you saying this is why India is coming to the table now?
India has no other option. Like I said, India has no other option. India successfully, claims that it has been very successful in bringing the Chinese on the table rather than, continuing the conflict it had in Galwan 2020.
All right, let me also welcome our guests who've joined us online. Mr. Shalinder Singh, he's a veteran of the Indian Army, also a defense and strategic analyst. And we've also been joined by Brigadier Retired Mr. Haris Nawaz, who's a senior analyst. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us on the show today. I'll start with you, Mr. Shalinder Singh. We've talked about all of these talks in a previous segment as well, and you emphasized on the success of the previous round of talks. Can you please also highlight what the previous 13 round of talks have actually achieved, and then what more is the 14th level round of talks that is going to be held on the 12th of January going to achieve?
If I want to put it as a discussion, not as a debate, 13 rounds of talk that both the countries will have discuss with each other anything under the sun. We have differences, China claiming anything, but at the same time, it is never ever that you can say that India has been brought to the negotiation. It's never like that. It's always a win-win situation. You don't see one-sided that somebody has got. What has success? The
Mr. Shilendra,
grounds now.
there's actually something wrong with the connection. We cannot understand you. Perhaps we'll try and fix it from our side as well. But if you can do something about it, that would be great because your voice is breaking up.
Yeah.
Till that time, we
Can you-
can go to Brigadier Harris.
Yeah.
All right, we'll come back to you, Mr. Shilendra Singh. Mr. Harris, let's include you in the conversation as well. And we'll come back to you, Mr. Shilendra Singh. When we speak about the way forward, of course, dialogue is important to be able to disengage and move things forward. And this is something that has been going on for a while. Now, one way to look at it, of course, is that so many round of talks have happened. But really what we want is some tangible result. Will we be able to see that, and in what form?
I think the problem is India must realize they always provoke the Chinese and also Pakistan. That should not never happen. What happened? India started building their air bases. They kept moving their heavy machinery. They went to construct a road all along it, and that was threatening because that it's very close to CPEC also. So Pakistan and China is very sensitive to this side. That whenever there is any problem, Gilgit sector, Skardu sector for for this CPEC, then both sides are very sensitive. And then, of course, India went to the Galwan Valley, and there was a problem because both sides were sitting over there. They were face to face each other, and there, we had a big clash. Indians had big clash with China where they lost 20 men. That the clubs and the sticks were used. That had never happened, and there was no gunfire was happened. So I think that was the basic reason why Chinese got offended. And then, of course, the basic reason was to suddenly revoke 370 and 35A, and Ladakh was also included in it. That China did not like it. It was seriously threatening their line of actual control. So they came in, and that's how the clash started off. That was the main reason of what happened, and why Pakistan is also very sensitive in Gilgit sector, which this Galwan Valley is very close to Skardu, where they directly threaten to our area of interest.
Right, with your permission, Sana, let us go back to Colonel Singh. Colonel Singh, while you're going to resume answering what Sana asked, let me ask you, or actually add to that question. What do you think will constitute progress in the 14th round? What you will call a success in coming days when the talks will take place, sir?
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir, you are, sir. Go ahead.
Oh, great, great. I have only tried to time. I have every time brought out till the time two countries sit down and talk. Take it, it's a success, grand success. That shows that both are prepared to double this talking to each other. Now coming to the
I
whatever
think
happened
perhaps,
at
Mr. Shilendra Singh, I think perhaps we will try and reconnect with you once again because unfortunately your voice is still breaking up. I'll come back to you.
If I could,
Yes, Faisal.
If I could ask a question from Brigadier Harris. Sir, don't you think that 29 of the new roads and a tunnel from the Indian side, and of course they are working on the airstrips as well, don't you think that they are aware of the fact that Chinese, they are not at Galwan, or they are not in eastern Ladakh, or they are not in, along the border with the Arunachal Pradesh just because of a few skirmishes? They are there for a longer time. And don't you think that it is a huge checkmate for India from the Chinese side, sir?
Definitely, and that is what actually Indian had designed, because when they saw a lot of infrastructure coming up, they were moving their heavy machinery, they were moving
There
their
seems to
tanks,
be
they were at
connection.
the road construction. So that was the reason that the Chinese were warned and they thought we have to move forward and deny India coming to this Galwan Valley, because that really, then they disputed really the hot spring is another sector that they were very concerned about it. Then Depsong is another area. So Chinese are very sensitive in that area, because if they come in that area, they dominate the heights. That means they can affect the CPEC, and Chinese are very concerned because it is their flagship. There's a CPEC of Road Belt Initiative. So that is why the Chinese moved and they captured a very good chunk of area to deny Indian access. And then, of course, Indian were they were ill prepared. That you know that they are not very fighting with army. They have not any clashes for the last 20-25 years with Pakistan, of course, and China. They've been doing a lot of exercises, and of course, Pakistan is well trained, battle hardened, because of that we have eliminated terrorism for Pakistan. So that was the reason China came forward and all captured all the sensitive areas from where they could dominate Indian movement. One, and number two, they finished the threat which India was posing towards Gilgit-Baltistan sector and also Skardu side, so that the CPEC road area remains secure. So those are the factors Chinese came forward, and then now India has a main friction that they want that China should withdraw from Hot Spring, then Depsong area, and then Chok. These are the things where that is a friction area now coming up, and Indians are trying their best that they want to negotiate. Then third round of conference again failed, which they had, I think, in October last year. And then they promised to have another now for this on 12th of January, the 14th round tabletop. So, and that is happening in Chinese side. This is a time now, I think India is again trying to hold meeting and convince Chinese to disengage, because 50,000, 60,000 troops are facing each other to each other. And whenever the troops are facing eyeball to eyeball, there are always likely chances then you can have a clash. Any trigger happy side can go into a conflict, and then it is unending, because when the war breaks out or the skirmish break out, then the dynamics you don't know what is going to happen. It takes your own course. So that is why both China, India is more concerned, because they cannot face China, they cannot fight China. They have a lot of other problems, their own country internal problems are
All right.
facing.
Thank
Then
you,
they
Mr.
have to
Harris.
have a partner.
Yes, Farrukh, when we look at the fact that when Mr. Brigadier Harris was talking about that there's always a chance of a skirmish if there are a large number of troops deployed. But again, do you think that this is actually a possibility with the kind of world that we're living in and the kind of engagement, of course, that is required for such issues to be resolved, and the fact that we've had these round of talks been going on for a while?
Right. And while everyone was talking about this, I was actually thinking that what is the end state? What do people want to achieve? Let me remind you, last time we were discussing these issues, I actually pointed out that there is a subtle difference between your other guests and yours truly, because I'm not a student of conflict studies, I'm a student of peace studies. And by virtue of that, I want to see opportunity wherever there is one, right? The problem again goes back to your question, whether there should be some kind of war, whether there should be some kind of skirmish in coming days or not. I think that an issue that is border issue that has been festering for 74, 75 years is not going to magically resolve itself through these dialogues. But what can happen is it can give you some kind of roadmap to actually de-escalate and go back to a more stable reality. What exactly is that more stable reality? It is not going to be something which is going to just appear out of thin air. You'll have to realize where things went awry. India and China have been actually having this confrontation for quite some time, but the recent trigger came from one fatal mistake from the Indian state, and that was nullifying Article 370 unilaterally, 35A also, and then they actually bifurcated Indian occupied Kashmir, bifurcated it and created Ladakh state, and then made it a UT, that is Union Territory, and absorbed it. That actually altered the status quo, and that has created all the problem. I think eventually both sides will have to actually go back to their standstill agreement and then reviving the pre-August 5, 2019 arrangement, where they'll have to actually reinstate the status quo status of Kashmir. That is how things actually go back to normal, and then of course both sides will have to be requested to be more flexible and stop actually being too muscular. That actually solves nothing.
Right. Mr. Shailendra Singh, can you please say something for me so that we can check that your audio is clear now?
Now, can you hear me now?
And hopefully it'll stay clear. Would you like to respond to our previous questions first, and then of course comment on the discussion that has gone on?
Is in a very quick way, very simply, that whether the or not withdraw.
बाजी को कहना है तस्वीर उतार दें.
Shailendra,
Countries.
Mr. Shailendra, we still cannot hear you. We're going to try and connect with you once again because unfortunately your voice is still not clear. It's quite unfortunate, but Mr. Shailendra, we'll try and establish our contact with you once again. With respect to what the discussion is, of course, with regards to the 5th of August, this is an important decision and prerequisite for things to go forward. But Brigadier Harris, when we see the kind of regime that currently exists in India, this does not seem to be something that they'll even consider.
That's the only how you can resolve. You see, you can't unilaterally revoke 370 and 35A and you feel that Pakistan and China will keep quiet, they will submit to them, and we accept all the hostility which India has done it. That's very unfair, and that is what the reason why Chinese moved forward, secure a chunk of area, and removed all the threat which was coming to CPEC. That was one of the factors, and now if they want to disengage and they want to go to the normal situation, because troops sitting across eyeball to eyeball is always a very dangerous proposition. So what they have to do, they should just revert to 370 and 35A, because that is the only answer. Nobody is accepting, not Pakistan, not Chinese, not Ladakh people, and not Indian occupied Kashmiri people. So that's a basically, this is a bone of contention. They must understand, stop bullying your neighbors. That is a problem. And then India must realize how Americans are using India as a proxy against China and Pakistan and CPEC. That's the big, and that's why they made it Quad group, in which Australia, Japan, India, and of course USA are there. So India has the designs to have a hegemonic design in this region, and they always feel that Pakistan remains the stumbling block. So that is what they have to now realize. The times have changed. Learn to live like good neighbors. Stop blaming Pakistan. And you've seen adventure. We were surgical strike again. We will go. Do you remember where when China war was there? Then the Indian Defense Minister, Indian Prime Minister were always talking that we are going to get Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan by force. Then China, Ladakh, we are going to get it. So these are provocative statements. That is how Chinese also felt offended, and it never happened in the history of war that 20 to 25 people are killed with clubs and sticks and no gunfire. So these are shows the morale and the training and professional efficiency of the Indian troops, and that of course we showed them on 27th February 2019. So that is the thing India must realize now, and the reason is always they want to divert the attention of their people, what is happening in Kashmir, how the Kashmiri young youth is killing their soldiers. Then there is a lot of enslaved movements. Then you have a lynching of Muslims. Then Sikhs are coming forward, like Christians are not happy. So all these things, when they find a difficult time or elections are coming, they put blame Pakistan and they go for surgical strike.
Sana,
So
with your
now these are
permission,
things we always take it.
Brigadier Harris, since we are talking about India being able to reverse its decisions, we have seen that Narendra Modi has withdrawn one decision that he made, that is the farmer laws in Punjab and throughout India. Do you think that this gives hope that tomorrow they can also do something similar in Kashmir and take back the August 5 decisions?
I think it is. I feel it. This should be done, but it looks very difficult because the problem was in Eastern Punjab. The Indian has to withdraw on the Kashmir Kisan law was that 23rd, 2023, the Sikh referendum is coming, and they wanted to cool down the Sikh movement in Eastern Punjab. That was the reason they withdrew. They tried their best to push their weight, but when they saw the things are getting worse, and all of the Sikh internationally seeing that Sikhs are coming forward and they're going for referendum, then they had to withdraw. Likewise, you see the Kashmiri people are standing up after Burhan Wani Shahadat. There's a big freedom struggle over there. And in Geneva Convention, if the country occupies another country, they have a right to go for armed struggle. And anybody they ask for help, it's legitimate. So the problem is now if we Islamic countries get together, we think about Palestine and Kashmir, then things are going to be different. Pakistan has done their best. Prime Minister of Pakistan has been a voice of Kashmiris in United Nations and all over the virtual conferences. But the problem is we understand what are the interests of NATO, USA, Indians because of they want to use as a proxy of India against China. So they are looking other sides. Otherwise, they talk about Afghanistan, what is happening in Afghanistan. They talk about human rights over there, but they know and they're not looking towards Kashmir. So this, I think, dual policy has to be changed. Pakistan is doing whatever is possible. Our foreign affairs done a lot of job over there, successful holding for OIC conference in Pakistan, but we need to do a bit extra. And our Kashmir committee has to be moving forward and do something extra and going to the world and explaining them what are the Kashmiri problems. But our team should be having a good communication skills.
Right. Faisal, when we see when we talk about the kind of response or the kind of progress that we want to see out of the talks, a statement that has come from Wang Wenbin is with regards to how to move towards a daily management phase from an emergency mode. What exactly does that entail, and what sort of measures are we looking at when we talk about that? Does that mean that the troops are still going to be there and there's going to be a way for both the sides to actually manage them on a daily basis? What else does it entail?
Sana, it of course changes are being made, or if there is obviously increasing the troops along the borders or anything like that, then of course they have to make each other aware of the facts, the ground facts. In past, of course, they hadn't had anything going on for 45 years. We need to understand that since 1975 until 2020, not a single event took place. Yes, there were verbal, obviously slurs exchanged towards each other from the both sides, but we never had anything like that, what we had in Galwan 2020. And after that, of course, they want to come up with a sort of mechanism that actually ensures both of the sides that whatever they are doing, they need to make the other party aware of it. But here I would like to highlight another thing. The point which is raised by Brother Farrukh, I think it is a very important point. This is when, abrogation of 370 and 35A was the moment that actually triggered it all. And if India successfully goes back to its position, that is the only way it can move forward and it can see peace on that border. But to me, I think unless it takes place, if it doesn't take place through the dialogue, then
I am seeing some of the powers, and I won't take any names here. They will be exploiting the fault lines of India, and we know
And
that in northeast there are multiple fault lines for India.
Faisal, our
and
guest is back.
Yeah.
Colonel Singh is back.
Yeah.
Let us first go there, if
True.
you allow me, allow us.
Mr. Shalinder, can you hear me? We unfortunately had to move to the telephone line and make do with your photograph. Can you hear us?
Colonel Singh, I can hear my own voice, but nothing else.
Well, I think perhaps today is not our day with Mr.
Yeah.
Shalinder Singh.
We haven't been that lucky today. To,
Yeah, even though the
obviously
picture
have-
is
Yeah,
really,
picture.
really handsome.
Absolutely. So
Excellent.
at least that's there.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, even though we don't have him today, hopefully we will be having him on another show as well. We have had him previously in a different show. We'll continue our discussion with regards to what's going on, of course, and the kind of measures that are important.
Yeah, if you can
Yeah,
allow me
yes.
to conclude.
Conclude,
Yes,
please.
Faisal.
Yeah, I just want to conclude that because it is very important. On the northeast, of course, India has multiple fault lines, and India, is already seeing things happening in there. On ground, the fault lines are getting strengthened and strengthened, and India obviously had to move quite a few soldiers from there towards the borders. So that too is a challenge for India, and I think India is failing to counter that threat. But to me, a power, I won't name it, but they will be obviously clandestinely trying to facilitate whatever is going on in fault lines, and I see that as a sort of as a turning point. If things get worse in them fault lines, of course India would have to kneel down, and in that kneeling down, of course the abrogation which is made towards 370 and 35A, they have to reverse that.
Right. Trust Faisal to throw breadcrumbs for us
just
to figure
very
out.
quickly, Raja Faisal has just proven he doesn't want this situation to be resolved, because the so-called power or superpower he is mentioning, if you keep on repeating its name or reference, Indians are going to have a heart and they will never come down from their high horse. So he is giving them hope. Don't go back. Keep on confronting each other.
Brigadier Harris, when we see, of course, that there's a negotiation taking place or a dialogue taking place, this means that both sides would have to compromise on some aspects. With regards to what actually can be done with both the sides, we know that the Chinese side is also quite adamant on the build-up that they are going towards at the line of actual control. And of course, the Indian side, we also know, does not seem to back off. With regards to progress, what sort of measures do you think are soft limits for both the countries and can actually be a step forward when we talk about the disengagement process? What actions can both sides really take?
Actually, the point is you negotiate when you are on a strong wicket. And Chinese are very strong at present. They're holding most of the Galwan Valley, and then they've got the Pangong Lake is there, east, southern and northern side. They have in Gogra sector, they have a control over it. So they don't have to go back because they have secured the area which was threatening to CPAC. That was the actually design. And of course, Chinese were very annoyed whatever they did, and they revoked 370. So the point is now India will have to kneel down. They will have to bend down. They were already accepted. They're just showing the word that India is negotiating, India is not accepting, but in the heart, they have accepted whatever the fate accomplished. So that is very clear. And they will have to accept it. Chinese have captured a large chunk of area, and they had already designed where they have to go. Now they have constructed bunkers, they have brought all the heavy weapons, machinery, they've made air bases over there now. So they are very well tucked in. And then of course their troops are very well trained, and they have shown their adventure when they worked for Indian. So that's the thing. And India now is down the valley, so they are not allowing them to even construct a road. So these are the factors why India is on a weaker wicket. India cannot achieve anything much better in negotiation. China has an upper edge because whenever you negotiate on a strong point, and that is what is exactly happening. So now India will have to accept the fate reality, and they will have to, I think, end of is that okay, they will pose a word that India has gained something, but actually they have to accept wherever they are sitting, And then, of course, if it is demarcated, then both sides are going to disengage because this engagement is very important. Otherwise,
Right.
these skirmishes
Right,
and
Brigadier Harris,
firing.
accepting reality is, of course, a very difficult thing for the Modi regime to be actually doing, and they require a lot of face saving if they actually want to do something, especially with the kind of build-up that they're going towards at the border, and then the kind of military power that they're also trying to gain overall. If that is true, and they are in a weaker position, as you're saying, and they will have to accept the reality, then what sort of face-saving measure is there for the Modi regime to justify that?
Modi didn't tell and their public what has happened in Galwan Valley. They didn't tell anything that how their troops have been killed. They were trying to cover up. Then the foreign media came up and they started showing the satellite pictures. Then things started coming up and they had to cut a sorry figure. And then, of course, he visited that place, if you recollect. And again, he was talking that we have done this, we have done that. They visited the troops, they were in the barracks area. But then the Indian public got furious and they had no face saving. So I think politically and militarily they had a setback that they will have to accept it. And I think Indian public also know it and they have accepted that this military and this government cannot do because they are adventurous. They
Right.
just they will try to create all the problems because now you see the Indians are totally isolated. Nepal has claimed their own area where Indians were claiming it. Bhutan has left them. Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Iran. So they wanted to isolate Pakistan and they have themselves been isolated.
Right.
So in this political environment, they're in a difficult position.
Absolutely, Brigadier Harris. And of course, there's always the option of actually celebrating their losses and just give more medals to their soldiers. So that's always one thing that they can do. Thank you so much for joining us in this segment. Before we conclude, Farrukh, don't worry, I am coming to you.
Yeah.
How can we end the show without your last word?
Yeah, one last intervention regarding face saving. You were talking about Narendra Modi and how he might be expecting some kind of face saving. You need face saving when you have a face. Unfortunately, what they have done, and frankly, it has nothing to do with China. When COVID-19, the second wave came, and people found bodies, bobbing in the waters.
True.
That actually totally crushed Modi's approval.
Right.
Right now, everything that you see, the numbers, the support, everything, it is all manipulated. So what I am seeing is that Modi government will keep on losing every election in coming days, and particularly UP and Punjab elections which are approaching, and then national election also. It is not a question whether they are going to lose or not. It is how decisive that crushing defeat will be. If it is really decisive, then India might have a reset button. And without that, I think the current government in India is merely a perpetual threat to Indian state and its existence.
And the only thing I think, if Chinese can accept the number which was actually given by the Indians in different possessions, they said that, oh, we killed 42 Chinese soldiers. I think if China can accept that number, then there are chances that India would be happy with that.
And let's see tomorrow what's going to happen at the 14th round of talks, and we'll be in a better position to see whether or not it's just a repeat of the previous 13 rounds or that something has actually come out of it. That is the hope, but let's see what happens. We'll see you tomorrow at 9 p.m. Don't forget to watch the debate.